I really learned it through my reading and just like a lot of deep dive study, that, wait a minute, like if you create an environment where your body feels safe to heal, it can actually heal itself. Like it's designed to heal itself. And
Totally.
so many of the habits and the lifestyle things that I was doing were not conducive to, say, like a restful night's sleep. I mean, I was on blue light all the time. I would take, phone. I was very codependent in relationships too. And so I really overextended myself all the time, bending over backwards for people where there was like only take and no give.
Yeah.
And so like the way I was living, my body couldn't heal even if it wanted to.
Cause everything feels bigger. It's all fire and little stones come.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. You are listening to Don't Be Afraid to Talk podcast with James. I believe if we are going to affect change, we must go back to the basic, which for me, in essence, is conversations. Talking and listening is key for growth, and I hope our stories will bring us together and we can draw inspiration from each other. Conversation will include topics such as mental and physical health, trauma and its effect, suicidal thoughts, recovery, and well-being. We will continue to raise awareness and offer a different perspective, a mindset, or an idea that could inspire you to take charge of your well-being and to grow as a human being. Thanks for joining us today for another episode. Today I'm joined by Erika. Erika is a body partnership coach, a writer, and a personal development nerd. And today we're going to be discussing her experience through anorexia. If you're listening today, have an open mind, and we hope that you can learn something from this episode. Erika, how are you?
Oh, I'm so well, James. Thank you for having me on. I'm excited to chat with you.
Great. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes. So as you said, I'm a body partnership coach. I live in Portland, Oregon right now with my family. I'm a stepmom and have a baby on the way, my first baby. So yeah, and I've always been really interested in health and wellness, but it's been quite a windy road to get to a place where I know how to engage with my body that's actually going to be supportive for not just physically, but for my mental and emotional health as well. So through my own process of figuring that out and wishing that I would have had a more consolidated place to go to figure that out, I've created my body partnership coaching and my podcast to help support people and make it accessible, all the stuff I learned on my healing journey in one place.
Fantastic. A lot to uncover today. Before we get going, we're going to play a quick game called 1 for 1.
Ooh, fun.
I'll give you a word and you say the first one that comes to your mind. The first word that comes to your mind. So 5 random words, so no pressure. The first one is fish.
Ooh, salmon.
And routine.
Did you say routine?
Routine, yes, sorry.
Comforting.
Curious.
The only way to be. Sorry, that's not one word.
Fish. Oh, did I say that already? Sorry. And baking.
Ooh. I would have to say comforting again.
Okay. And the last one is green.
Healing.
Super. That's it?
Good game. I like that. That's fun.
Just to throw you off.
Yeah.
So thank you for coming on. We're just going to discuss your story. So we're going to go back from the start with this childhood, which I like to hear about. So can you just tell us a bit about growing up?
Yeah, so I'm the middle of 3 girls, and growing up, I have always been a very contemplative person and deep thinker and had a lot of questions. And there was a lot of a lot of things that were in my family dynamic and environment that were unsettling, and I didn't quite understand what was going on. As a kid, you don't really know everything that's happening or don't understand it fully. And so my way of coping with not only stress of a chaotic home environment, but also just the unknown of not knowing what was going to happen because of the chaos. I had a lot of fear and anxiety. And so my way of, as I said, coping with that was really to turning to restricting food, over exercising, obsession over health and wellness. Just really, I see it now as a place to give my mind to go that felt safer than thinking about what's going to happen to my family. Are we, is everything going to fall apart? Life as I know it, that sort of thing. And unfortunately, because I wasn't around adults who had healthy stress management skills or emotional regulation tools, my parents couldn't give me what they didn't have as far as how to work through big emotions and feelings in a healthy, productive way. And so that was really the only mode I had early on. Mm. And so I look back with so much compassion on that child who was trying to do the best with what they had to survive an emotionally really intense climate in my home. But now, and part of the healing process is to go back to that inner child and remind them and comfort them and let them know that there's other tools available now. Like you don't have to just survive. You don't have to go to, coping mechanisms that are going to be actually destructive for you. There's a whole wealth of resources that are super nourishing and healing that you can turn to when you're stressed or feeling anxious. Obviously in the last 2 years, there's been a lot of unknowns for everybody. And so that's, it's been really neat for me to see that the way that am able to deal with that now because of the tools I have is so much different than when I was a kid. And so, that's a little bit about my background.
Yeah. And how was the relationship with your mother?
With my mom. So in my family dynamic, my dad was very, very hands-off and emotionally withdrawn from the whole family unit. And so my mom was everything. She also homeschooled my sisters and I. And so we were with her all the time. And she, kind of taught us everything we knew about the world and was our support system and our teacher, our support system, our mom, everything. So I think that at the time it was so important that I saw her in a certain light that now as I've grown up, I've realized that, there are things on both sides for my parents that maybe weren't the best or weren't the healthiest for me. I know they loved me so much and were doing the best they could, but it's been interesting to unpack that because when I was a kid, I would have thought like my mom and I have this great relationship, and, cause she was everything and I needed her. But I do think there were some challenges, mainly just in that, there wasn't, she wasn't able to give me a lot of those tools to work through what I was going through because she didn't have them. And she was in a really stressful relationship herself with my dad. And so I just think she couldn't offer a lot of emotional support either because she had a lot going on for herself. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At the time as a child, like looking back on it now, you can see the pattern in the dots.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. But as a child, for you, was everything just normal, or did you ever feel like something's not right here?
I think there was a little bit of a. Oh, go ahead.
Like, did you think like, oh, childhood was great?
No. So that is what's so fascinating. So once I got married at age 24, my husband grew up totally different in a lot of ways. He grew up going to public school and, just had a really different life than I did. And it's so funny because he'll reminisce about being a child and like how it was so fun being a child. I just want to go back to childhood and, the carefree living of high school. And I literally cannot relate to that. I'm like, what do you mean carefree childhood? I would never go back to childhood because it was like one of the most stressful periods of my life was being a kid. And he just can't, it's like a disconnect for him. And so I find now, looking back, I'm like, wow, that was not normal. I think at times as a kid, maybe I'd go to a friend's house and it was so weird to see like their parents interacting in a healthy way or whatever. But I also thought a lot of what went on in our house was normal. I thought it was, a lot of the things that we experience, like maybe this is just how every family is, So
as a kid, you never think like, oh, what's my friend doing? You just think this is what it is.
Yeah.
When we talk about dysfunction, we're talking about just emotional and physical as well.
So in my household, I would say definitely like emotional abuse, and emotional neglect for sure was going on, as well as just this constant, well, I guess that fits under the emotional abuse category. My parents were always, one or the other, we're going to divorce or leave each other, but it would never happen. And we would overhear constant fighting. Our parents would sleep in separate rooms. My mom would leave the house after a fight. And as a little kid, that was what was so confusing. It's like our mom is our only kind of like home base. And then when a fight would happen, she would leave. And so we're here then with our dad, who we didn't have really any relationship with and didn't really feel super safe with. And so that was, as a kid looking back too, I was like, that was really actually upsetting to me. It's like our only person now is gone, like she'd always come back. But as a kid, you don't know how long are they going to be gone? Will they come back? So it was just very chaotic. Yeah.
Yeah, that is. And when your eating disorder, when did that develop? Around what age?
So that really came into full force at age 14. And that is when I started watching The Biggest Loser. It was kind of around that time. And we had also been planning a family vacation to Hawaii. And so I think those two things were the perfect storm of like I wanted to feel pretty in a swimsuit and was like really worried about how I looked. But also now I'm more aware of there was a lack of education and empowerment around the transition from girlhood to womanhood and around understanding the menstrual cycle for women and things like that. It was a very shameful thing. Anything related to sex was super shameful because I grew up in a very conservative, strict religious community as well. And so that made me really afraid of becoming a woman because in my mind, being sexual was bad and dirty and gross. And so like, I didn't want to become a woman that maybe guys would look at me because then that would mean something's wrong with me, according to like my religious culture.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
So I also think that subconsciously, the eating disorder came on at the time where I was starting to transition into womanhood and I wanted to shut it down because I thought it wasn't safe, and I would be shameful. And as a byproduct, especially with anorexia, often you lose your menstrual cycle and it totally disrupts like the normal hormonal progression that happens for girls. And that was the case for me. So I then kind of operated in this very masculine mode because the eating disorder kind of shut all of that down, which felt safer for me because of the culture I was growing up in as well.
And that was your, not escape, but that was your way of controlling your environment?
Yeah, and so much of the eating disorder in all kind of ways was about control, just like trying to grasp for a sense of control in some area of my life. And that was a very tangible one for me to grab a hold of.
And when you, for someone that's going through anorexia, you often hear the expression like, why don't you just eat food?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And the funny thing is, professionals would ask me that. I mean, people who do this for a living, the nutritionists, the dietitians. And I'm like, shouldn't you know that's not an easy question to answer? Like if I knew, I'd fix it. I don't know. I always knew it had to be more than food because I also loved cooking. So it was this weird dichotomy of like, I've always, as a little kid, I was making food for the family at a very young age. I loved cooking. And then all of a sudden, such a dysfunctional relationship with food when I had my eating disorder. So it was like, I know I love food. I don't think I'm actually afraid of food, but yeah, it was so funny when people would ask me that. I was like, you tell me what's going on. Like, I don't know. Yeah. You're the professional.
Especially when you love cooking as well, and like you're making the meals, but you don't really want to eat. And did anyone in your
Yes.
family ever notice this?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, especially my mom. She's really the only one who would say anything to me about it. I know that my sisters and my dad maybe noticed, but she eventually, so it was like May that year I was 14, and we went to Hawaii. It was 3 months later that I had dropped so much weight that my mom started to get alarmed, and she took me into therapy and medical intervention and all of that. And so she definitely noticed that, I'd go from eating a regular meal to half that, to a fourth that, to a crumb. And I didn't even notice it, but she was like, okay, wait a minute. Something is not right here. Yeah.
So you didn't notice what you're doing?
No,
like
not
when
at
your
first.
meals were reducing?
No, not at all. Mm-mm. Which is so weird, but no, I didn't.
Yeah,
And was actually really Yeah, I was really defensive when my mom pointed it out too. I was like, no, I'm not. Like, I'm not doing that, because I just couldn't see it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it wasn't a conscious decision you were making. It's like, I'm not going to eat today. Oh, I just have a small portion. You were just doing a behavior, but you didn't know why you're doing it, or you weren't aware that you were doing it.
I mean, if you think about when you're really hungry and how hard it is to think clearly and stuff, the thing with anorexia is that you're constantly malnourished. Like, literally your brain does not work correctly. And so in your body's in constant fight or flight when you lack nourishment and nutrients and things like that. And so I could not think clearly about what was going on. So some of it was conscious, but there was a lot of it too that I kind of felt like it was an out of body experience. Like, I am doing this and I'm not eating and I'm making myself go hungry, but I don't even know why. And I feel like powerless to change it, because couldn't I just go eat food? Like, I could in theory, but I wouldn't let myself for whatever reason. So it was just it was a very out of body kind of experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. Like, the questions might sound simple, but I'm just trying to understand it for myself, because like that, when you hear anorexia, perception is, why don't you just eat? That is what people will think. But there's a link between the person obviously wants to eat, but like you said, you wanted to eat, but you also didn't want to eat. Yeah. And like during that time, how was school for you? Was it still? I'm guessing there was a lot of change in school as well, if you're going through like something like this.
Yeah, I mean, as far as school goes, because I was homeschooled, I really didn't probably experience what girls would maybe if they were in public school at this time. I think in a lot of ways that actually was a positive about being homeschooled, because it was I mean, it would have really disrupted. I was out several days a week at appointments and things like that, at the beginning when my mom first kind of intervened. And so that would have really disrupted a normal public school schedule. So I think that worked in my benefit, that I didn't actually fall behind in school or anything like that, because I could do it whenever. I mean, I would bring my school books to the waiting room and do it before therapy or whatever. So I think that turned out to be okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And when your mother first took you to the doctor, and how was that? Like, how was that experience?
I was very resistant, because it's like, you're going to take away my life jacket, like what I see as my life jacket to survive my childhood experience, and not give me anything else. Like, you're just saying you need to start eating, or we're going to hospitalize you and put you on a feeding tube. And that's terrifying, so, there was not a lot of resources at the time in the area I lived about eating disorders, or there was no treatment centers, like an inpatient treatment center whatsoever. And we looked at sending me to one out of state, but we ended up not, that sort of thing. But yeah, I was very resistant to it. I wanted I wanted the attention off of me because I didn't like everyone all of a sudden really worried about me. But at the same time, I was like, okay, I'll play along to a degree, but I really don't see, I guess I really didn't see what the alternative was going to be to feeling safe. I was like, this is how I feel safe in the world. It's controlling this. And you're not giving me a solution. You're just telling me I have to stop. So then what? Yeah.
And so I'm going to go back to that question. And did you feel like if you were to gain weight or whatever, you would lose control?
Yeah, I felt so out of control to gain weight for sure. And yet everybody wanted me to. That was the other weird thing, is that's the only thing they were marking. Like, that was my measure of getting better. But like, we know now, and this is a mental health podcast, like there is a whole nother side to be explored when it comes to a behavior like, anorexia. So it was just so weird to me that everyone just wanted me to see a bigger, larger number on the scale and think, oh, that means she's better. But I knew inside, like, no, I still feel like my world's, undone. So,
yeah. So when you went to the doctor, you think they were more focused on, okay, how can we put you into a health plan to get you eating right so you can gain your weight back, instead of, was that your approach?
Yeah. And the weird thing about that was there was not a lot of awareness around nutrition either. And so like the suggestions was like, eat more junk food, you'll gain weight. And I was like, I've always wanted to care for my body in a healthy way. Even before the eating disorder, I was the girl who would order salad at every restaurant, And so it was very confusing to me, because I'm like, I thought these foods are not good for you, but now you're telling me I need to eat them. So that was also really confusing for me. It didn't feel right.
No, because another stereotypical viewpoint that when someone wants to gain weight, it's like, just eat all the junk food. You put it on quicker. Yeah.
Yeah.
which is not ideal for anyone. Well, especially if you're eating it. You feel in your body as well, sorry, let me have my drink of water. Sorry. So one of the things you mentioned as well is becoming addicted to exercise. How did that come about?
Well, I figured out like I could, first of all, I felt good. I mean, there was like the chemical changes and stuff that happened after a good workout, and you feel a little high from that. So I think there was a appeal with that. But then also, honestly, at the beginning too, it was like, I can lose weight faster. And I felt like I was in control the smaller I got. I felt like things were spiraling out of control because I was shocked at how fast I was dropping weight. But at the same time, I felt like that showed that I was controlling something well. And so that gave me some sense of safety. So I think that there was a kind of a collaboration with that. I also was not sleeping. I stopped sleeping during this time because my body a doctor later explained to me that my body was just trying to stay alive. So things like sleep were an extra. It couldn't send resources to let me actually sleep. But I would get up in the middle of the night for a lot of people, at 3:30 or whatever, and work out for a couple hours. Cause what else am I going to do, at that time of day? So yeah, that's kind of how that piece looked as well.
Yeah. And would you, obviously after your work day, have something to eat, right? Because it's,
I would. It's like, well, at what point of the eating disorder that looked really different probably, but yeah, I did. I had to eat something. So I don't remember exactly. Yeah.
And when you started going to therapy and your relationship with a therapist, was anyone trying to figure out what's going on behind the condition?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would like to say yes, but I feel like my experience of therapy was a lot more of solving the food problem, solving the workout addiction, that sort of thing. But I do remember some specific times where I was break down, crying in counseling, being like, what I'm really afraid of is that my parents are going to get divorced and what will happen to me and my sisters. And like, I did voice that. I don't remember exploring that at all. Like, I don't remember the therapist asking me questions or anything about that, but I do remember trying to reach out and be like, there's more going on here. Like, I think this is really about my family maybe, but I don't remember people really asking questions or digging into that as far as like the therapist.
Yeah, because because obviously, I'm guessing the therapist was trying to understand what you're doing instead of what's happening behind what you're doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So my next question is, so I'm just trying to understand this anorexia thing because I haven't a clue about it. Yeah, sorry. When you're underweight, did you, like for yourself, did you feel that you were overweight?
Yeah, so kind of like the body dysmorphia sort of thing.
Okay.
Yeah, to a degree. I don't think as extreme. I remember this exercise, my nutritionist would have all these like outlines, figures of bodies, and she would make me point to which one I think I am to see like if I had an accurate view of myself. So it was really interesting, but I think to a degree I did have some of that going on. But it's hard to know from the inside. Like I'm so close to it to know exactly. But I do remember there was a point where I started to drop so much weight that I actually got scared. Like I could see through my skin. It became translucent and I was so cold all the time, like shaking, shivering, where I was like, okay, maybe this is too much, but I didn't know how to stop it either. So it's like, I don't know. I think I had to a point, I probably had some body dysmorphia, but then I did reach a point where I was like, I actually think I look sick now. Like I don't look well. Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. It was like, this is getting a bit too far now. Yeah. And throughout this period, when you're going through the condition, did your relationship with your father change at all? No. Did it ever like trying to show interest, or was it still distant?
No, I mean, that was really difficult for me. He never once mentioned it, asked me, like never once until I was like in my 20s. He like brought it up one time. I mean, it was so amazing to me. I was like, I do not know how you are just totally hiding from this. So that was
like, it was happening for so long.
Yeah. And I did. It's like, to me, it felt like kind of a near-death experience. And my dad couldn't even bother to say, are you okay? Like that was so mind-blowing to me. And I just know he didn't know how to approach it. And it was probably just overwhelming to him. But there was definitely stuff to work through in my adulthood about like, why didn't he say anything? Yeah. It was very, very weird to me as a kid. Like, what's going on? Yeah.
And did he ever say to you why he never said anything? Or he didn't know what to say?
No, he's never said that. He it was just one time in passing in my early 20s where he like brought it up. But I still never know exactly to this day. I guess I could ask him, but why he never said a word. Yeah,
that's strange. Well, for him, it's probably not strange because obviously his upbringing is different as well. So
very different.
Yeah. And when did things start to change for you? And from this, like, when did you realize, like, okay, I need to take on a different path here?
Yeah, I think it came over a long period of time in a lot of different phases, the healing process. But I do remember when I was 18, I went to counseling for the first time on my own volition. Like I chose the counselor, I drove myself, and I was invested in it. And I was getting ready to go to like a 3-month program out of state. And my motivation was that I didn't want my experience of that program to be hindered or in any way by this eating disorder. And so I really wanted to get to a better place in order to really enjoy and be present for that. And so that was kind of my motivation. And that was really helpful. But then when I moved actually out of state full-time in my early 20s, when I moved to Portland, I again my parents actually got divorced in my early 20s. They finally did. So at that, yeah, crazy.
Long coming.
That was its own kind of craziness that happened around that. But at that time, I went back to counseling just because I could kind of feel myself spiraling. And I was like, there's got to be a different way to deal with anxiety. Like I'm so done with an eating disorder being my only way to cope. And so I think that's when I really started to build up my tools and my emotional regulation tools, and feel like I could be really well resourced in whatever comes my way and not have to use the eating disorder anymore. And I really think since then I really haven't, because I felt like I've had other much better strategies for coping. Yeah.
And when you started on that journey, what were some of the things you did for us? Because if you're not aware of it, you wouldn't know even where to start. So
some of the things I did first to heal.
Yeah.
So I was really involved in I had a really involved community when I moved to Portland. And I honestly think that when you're going through a healing process, it is so important not to isolate yourself. And that can be easy to do because on the one hand, you feel like I'm a mess, like who's going to want to be around me sort of thing. But then you also, I mean, it is not only healing to know that people still love you, even though you're figuring it out and you're in process. So that's really healing. But then also to be invested and engaged in other people's worlds and to realize like there's more going on out here and more I could be a part of than just like my storm of stuff. It's almost like a break to be able to be in other people's stuff, a break from your own life. So I feel like that was so supportive. And some of there's really significant healing moments that stand out to me, just things people would say that they didn't even know like were exactly what I needed to hear in those moments. But that was probably one of the biggest things for me at first. And then I've always been, as you read, like I've always been a personal development nerd. So I really threw myself into podcasts and books and anything I could get my hands onto, specifically around anxiety at first, because there was a really strong link between when I would feel like a panic attack coming on. My kind of default for so long had been to manipulate food to kind of quelch that. And so I was like, okay, I've got to figure out some other ways. I've always loved movement as well. So I was a runner for a really long time. So that would be really helpful for me to just go for a run. But then also more recently in the last several years, I've gotten into meditation and tapping, and yoga and some more gentler practices. So it doesn't get tangled up in, again, with like the whole exercise addiction thing either. Cause like if you're doing yoga, you're not, it's hard to really make that about body image. It's like, it's really soothing. It's really about calming your nervous system. And I think that is the key. And what I, now want to teach my child from a very young age is how do you regulate your nervous system when you start to feel those intense emotions coming on. And some of the things that I mentioned, just a minute ago have been really helpful. And realizing when something comes up, like you immediately can go into an emotional regulation tool and feel better within a couple minutes. You don't have to let it be your whole day or your whole week sort of thing.
Yeah. I think if children start learning about emotional regulation, the world would be such a better place in the future.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Like most of us, well, for me anyway, I still don't know how to start working through that.
Yeah.
And what was one of your biggest challenge?
In a specific area or
in terms of in healing, when you wanted to heal from this, what was your biggest challenge? Like, what do you find that you just couldn't get over? Or was there any?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. Honestly, one of the biggest hurdles was when it comes to eating disorders, there's a mainstream recovery camp that kind of like AA, kind of like alcoholism, where they tell you once an alcoholic, you're always an alcoholic. And you can't ever totally get out from underneath that identity. And I think for a long time, it felt so out of reach, the thought that like I could go throughout my day eating, and not once think about having to, because I was very controlled, ate in a controlled ways with an eating disorder. So I'd be measuring my food and counting out the almonds and calculating the calories and like exhausting just to eat a meal. And I mean, now where I'm at now, I never could have fathomed that was even possible, to literally not care, not do that, and to be able to eat according to hunger and fullness. I totally had no hunger and fullness signals. You totally squash them when you're, in the throes of an eating disorder. So learning how to hear them again, I mean, it just feels like, it's so weird. It's like, this must be what it feels like to be a normal person with food. I never thought that was within my reach. I would ask counselors, like, is it possible to fully get through this and get to the other side? Is there another side? Or I'm just doomed to always have a complicated relationship with food? And I got mixed answers on that, but now I can say for sure, I know that it's 100% possible to go throughout your day and not once ever think about the calorie in the food or anything like that. And to be able to stop when you're full and eat when you're hungry, and not, because I ate very much on a schedule as well. Like I could only eat at these times in the day. It's just so much more fluid now. And I didn't think that was within reach. So that was one of the biggest hurdles, is really believing that it was possible for me to be totally free. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And when you talk about counting food, like what were some of the things that you did?
Oh my goodness. So, I mean, I don't know how much of this is helpful or not, but I mean, it just felt, it felt really crazy, kind of crazy of like, I mean, I just remember I would count out, say it's crackers or whatever. I would count out how many crackers and then like how many calories is that. And I was like, I didn't want that many calories. I'd like break a cracker in half and put it back in the box, because like a half a cracker is really going to make a difference, like a huge difference. I mean, just crazy stuff like that, which makes no sense to me now. But in my brain, it felt like it totally made sense at the time.
At the time,
Yeah.
Yeah. Now it's like half a cracker is not going to...
I know, it sounds so silly now. Yeah.
But I suppose when it's happening to you at that moment, it makes sense in your head. It's only when you're outside that when you're looking in, you're like, what is that person doing?
And it's like, oh my goodness, I have so much compassion for that little girl who thought a half a cracker was going to help her feel safe. Like it was that powerful to her that like, I need to only have a half more, because then everything will be in control. I mean, that's just like mind blowing to me. So.
And from listening to your podcast, I think one of the things you spoke about is when you're working on yourself and you had a belief of betrayal and from your mother when you're doing your inner child work. And when you say betrayal, as in, did you feel like if you did the work, you would betray her, or?
Yeah, so that's kind of that's a whole nother area. I remember that episode you're talking about, and how sometimes we say we want to get well, and whatever that means for you, but subconsciously there's actually a benefit to staying sick that we're not looking at. And so I think for myself, there was this almost habit or addiction. I've heard people refer to it as an addiction to struggling and to suffering and to things being hard all the time. And part of that came from my religion, because there was like a glorification of struggling, and like you were a more holy person if you were suffering. And then part of it was like, just like my mom, very much, it was kind of this martyr thing, because in some ways, the way that I see it, of course, we all have our own views of this in the family, but it was very much, respected by our like religious community that she was staying in an unhealthy relationship and trying to save it because that was the good like thing to do as a woman in our community. And so because of that, then and not only that, but she stayed home and raised us. And like, she even says now, like, I stayed for so many years because I was sacrificing for you guys, like for you kids. And so it's like, oh, it's our fault. Like you stayed and suffered so long. That makes me feel
thanks
great.
For that. Yeah.
When all of us behind closed doors, all of us sisters just wanted like it to end because we were all so, in so much misery. So I was like, we didn't want that. We didn't want you to stay and suffer for for that many years for us. Like, so anyways, I think for myself, I had to get to this place where I could accept that my life could be meaningful and I could be a person that created, beauty in the world without the suffering. Like it didn't make me better in any way. And just because my mom chose that does not mean that I have to choose that. And I think you can be a powerful woman that, creates influence and change in the world that makes the world a better place without suffering. Like that's not required. And I think because I grew up so religious and mainly my mom, my dad didn't even attend church hardly ever. But my mom did.
Interested.
Yeah, he really wasn't that much. So I think in that ways too, it almost felt like I was betraying my religion, and my mom was such a huge part of my religious upbringing that it kind of felt like they were so intertwined as well. Because there's been a lot of layers to this, but I have had to come to terms with that. I definitely had religious trauma in my background as well. And I think that played a role, and like definitely in my eating disorder, mainly like how I felt about being a woman and things like that. So that's another way that I'm like, branching off from kind of my mom's worldview and having to come to terms with, this is what feels healthy for me though, even if, she doesn't approve of it, so like, or whatever. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of what I was referring to. I don't know if that's way more than you wanted, but.
No, I think that's what you're getting that's what I was getting from listening to that as well, because there would be, depending on your background, if you like that, especially with religion, Jesus Christ, if you do this kind of inner child work, there's a lot of this walk around freeing yourself. And when you come from that background, you almost feel like if you free yourself, you're detaching from that. And I think that's what some people might just don't do the work and want to stay there because like that identity is what you've had for so long. And it could be scary for some.
Yeah.
Or you could feel you could feel like what you felt like you're betraying us, so you're like, okay, this is too hard.
Yeah. And I mean, to be honest, even in my adulthood, I would have conversations with my mom where she'd almost express that, like she felt like I raised you different, like what's happening? So I mean, so those are like actual conversations that were like,
like,
oh,
Erika,
wow.
what happened to you?
Just being able to stand on my own 2 feet and be like, no, but this feels right for me. And I need to live in integrity with myself first and foremost. Like that's important.
Yeah. I think for parents, they don't quite understand that when one is branching out, you're like, oh, what happened? What went wrong here? Yeah. Yeah, totally. And your own business, what you do, what is Body Partnership? What's that about?
Yeah, so that was born out of, for a long time, I saw myself as broken, the eating disorder, and I needed to somehow fix my body. And also when you have been sick, and I say that kind of like in quotation marks, for so long, I mean, it was like over a decade before I really felt on a regular basis that I wasn't drowning in this eating disorder all the time. And so I was so used to feeling and being sick all the time that I just assumed, like, I guess my body just doesn't really work right. Like I can't sleep. I guess my body just isn't good at sleeping. I guess, with like my hormones being so out of whack. there were like all these, I can't even remember all these weird symptoms, but I just thought this must be who I am. And my body just must be defective. This is like, it just
Like-
doesn't sleep, I guess.
It was like,
And-
I'm just broken. I'm just broken.
Yeah. I'm just broken. Exactly. And I really learned it through my reading and just like a lot of deep dive study, that, wait a minute, like if you create an environment where your body feels safe to heal, it can actually heal itself. Like it's designed to heal itself. And so many of the habits and the lifestyle things that I was doing were not conducive to, say, like a restful night's sleep. I mean, I was on blue light all the time. I would take, phone. I was very codependent in relationships too. And so I really overextended myself all the time, bending over backwards for people where there was like only take and no give. And so like the way I was living, my body couldn't heal even if it wanted to, so it's like, okay. So it's not actually that my body's broken. It's that I'm living in a way where it literally can't catch its breath to heal the way it's designed to. And so I remember the first time I actually went to a naturopathic doctor a couple of years ago. And he was the first one ever. I came with massive, like severe digestive issues. And he like listened to my story and kind of nodded and then was like, are you like blocking out certain emotions and not willing to like look at them? Are there emotions you've like, he used the phrase like locked up in this dark basement that you're not letting out? And I was like, who do you think you are? Like, I'm coming here because I can't eat because my stomach hurts so bad or whatever.
And you're
so
talking about
emotions.
Emotions.
Yeah. And so that's where I realized like, oh, okay. So like what's happening in my digestive tract is a result of my body literally not feeling safe because I am living such a stressed out, overcommitted, burn myself to the ground kind of life. And so once I started to really pull back and focus on like nourishing myself before I turn outward and like help everybody else, I was like, oh, my body can sleep. Actually, like it's not broken. It needs me to partner with it to create an environment where it can do what it was made to do. And so that's where I developed Body Partnership and am passionate about helping people look at their life and see like what areas of my life am I operating in a way that my body actually can't do the healing I want, because it can't catch its breath. It can't breathe because I'm just running in overdrive all the time or overcommitted or have no boundaries. That sort of thing. Yeah.
That drains you. You don't even notice it. But I think you do it, and especially depending on your background, you do it because you're a nice person, even though it's nice to be nice, but it's also draining you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So your body, so your body will struggle.
Yeah, I mean, one of the greatest gifts you can give to people is your health. Like, is you showing up in your healthiest, most vibrant self, not just at all costs help people, but like do it from a place of health and vitality and overflow. And the help you can give is so much better. Like, it's just so much better quality because it's actually the fully firing you, not the drained, depleted you.
Yeah.
So it took me so long to learn that, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm guessing that was difficult as well. Like you mentioned when you went to the doctor and he started talking about emotions. Like, from that conversation with him, did you take away like, okay, there's more to this then? I need to start looking into like what's going on with my emotions so I can come up with a balance.
Yeah, I mean, I think that piece for a lot of people is a lot scarier because in some ways, it's so much easier for them to prescribe you a supplement and say, all your problems will be gone if you just take this.
Take this for a month and you'll be fine.
Yeah, but when you say like, oh, wow, like you have childhood trauma or you have, deep emotional wounding that you haven't looked at, I mean, that is like, oh no, like I just wanted you to give me a pill and be on my way, So
I'll be like, I'll take that bottle, please. Don't open that door.
Yeah, and I think that everybody is going to come to a point of readiness to look deeper in their own time, when they feel like they have the support around them to do that, and they're in a safer place to do that. I couldn't do that when I was younger because I still lived in that home, and like, what am I going to do? Like, so that I now see that I was in a much better place to deal with all that deep stuff once I was much, much older and further along, and more like I was further away from my family in that experience in childhood. So, but I do see that a lot for people, that they want it to be some easy food protocol or supplement that just fixes all their problems. And it's like, okay, but there's probably a reason your body is not functioning how it's supposed to that goes way deeper than that. So, yeah.
Yeah. That's the hole that no one wants to. Suppose
Exactly.
it comes to you when you're ready for it. You know, if you're not ready for it, you just go for the quick fix.
Yeah.
And then when you take enough and realize that this doesn't work, then you go back. Yeah. And what sort of advice would you give someone who's had challenge with like anorexia, especially females? Because I'm guessing there's a lot more happening in the female body than it would be on a male body.
Yeah. And of course, since I'm a woman, like I can only speak from my experience.
I'm just guessing that as well.
Yeah. It's probably looks so different for men. Not that they don't experience it, but I'm sure it's different. So, number one piece of advice. Well, I would say first, like, because I didn't hear people say this enough, that there is another side. There is not a just, I'm going to live with this. Like, unless you, like, if you really truly don't want to live with it for the rest of your life, that is available to you 100%. Like, it is not, you don't have to just sign on to like, this is my problem now forever, you know, like, no,
this is me.
Yeah, it's so interesting. People project these things onto you. I mean, even with my pregnancy, I had heard and read, and so many people had said, like, if you have a eating disorder history, you're going to struggle when you get pregnant and your body's changing. I have not struggled once with that. Like, I love my body changing. Like, it doesn't bother me, which is so, like, not what everyone said was going to happen. But it just goes to show that, like, you can get to a place of body partnership and love and, like, just living, like, feeling at ease with your body, regardless of how deep, like, you were in the eating disorder. Like, it doesn't determine how far healing you can go, like how healed you can be. There is no, like, I'm too far that I can't ever have a life that's, like, free of this. So.
Yeah, totally. There's never, no matter how deep you are into something, there's always a way. Well, it's easier for me to say now because I'm not in anything, but there's always a way out.
Yeah. And I guess the other thing that I would add, because I know I had moments where I felt like I wouldn't be able to survive the healing process. Like, it would be too much. Like, you can't, like, you are so much, like, more resilient than you think you are. And I mean, even as different things have popped up with the childhood trauma stuff, it feels at first like, oh my gosh, I won't be able to survive if I look into this. If I dive deep into this, you know, I'm not going to make it out. It's like, you will. Just take it one step at a time and, like, one layer at a time. You don't have to do it all at once. Just, like, your body's wise and directs you kind of what layer to peel back when it's safe and ready. And so just, like, follow that and don't worry about, will I be able to handle the next thing?
Just do what you need to do when you're doing it. And sorry, just 3 more questions. What's one thing you're proud of?
Related to everything we're talking about, or anything?
Like just for yourself. Like, what's one thing you can look back and be like, I'm proud of that. Maybe 2 things.
Yeah. No, you ask great questions. I actually am really proud of, like, not have given up on myself and not ever resigning or bought into this is just my life. This is just the way it's going to be. Because And I mean, even now, maybe it's not, it's not the eating disorder, but there are other areas in my life that I see room for growth in and transformation. And I've just always had that desire and that like knowing that like things can get better if I'm willing to do the work and really show up for myself, like they can get better. And so I don't know, I am proud of that because I think it's really served me well in all areas.
What sort of, you mentioned books, what sort of things do you read? And I'd like to know what people are reading.
Ooh, yeah. Goodness. So, I mean, right now I've been reading a lot of books on pregnancy and birth and stuff. I'm trying to get my head around that. Yeah. Trying to get my head around that. But, oh gosh, like, okay. So one book I love, that's like an insider scoop on like a counselor who goes to counseling and then she gives you like, a windows into her counseling sessions is Maybe We Should Talk. And the author's first name is Lori. It's like, it's a blue book with like a huge orange Kleenex box. You can't miss it.
Oh, yes, yes.
It is so compelling.
Maybe I should talk to someone.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I loved that because I actually went to school for psychology and was starting my graduate program in counseling. And so that was kind of the first direction I was going. And so I still have a fascination with kind of like that world as well. And it was just so interesting to see the difference between like how people present themselves and then what she would see in the counseling room. And just, yeah, it was so cool. If you're a psychology nerd, you'll love the book. Yeah.
And did you read any books in relation to anorexia or anything like that?
I did read a lot of memoirs. Some of them I don't actually recommend because they could be pretty triggering. Sometimes when people share too many of the details, if you're not far enough along in your journey, you get ideas for how to like restrict yourself further. It's not good. So if the people who are really careful about how they write, and really more focused on like the healing and not all the dirty like details, those were helpful. But so I actually did read one of the most popular books is like Living with Ed.
Okay.
Oh, I don't know. I can't think of the author, Jenny or something like that. She's written a couple books and those are pretty helpful. It like personifies Ed as an abusive boyfriend so that you can like detach from it and realize like Ed being eating disorder is not you. It's like this abusive boyfriend you have to break up with kind of thing. And so that was a helpful book.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, I think those books are pretty helpful. I mean, they're pretty old, but kind of like staples in the eating disorder healing community.
Mm-hmm. And what does well-being mean to you?
Oh, sorry, what?
What does well-being mean to you?
Oh, well-being.
Yeah.
Well-being. Feeling at peace in your own skin. Like you don't have anything to hide from, like you don't have to hide from yourself or run from yourself. Like just feeling just like safe in your own body. Like that to me is like what it means to feel well. And because for so long I didn't feel that. I felt very unsafe in my own skin.
Yeah. Brilliant. And where can people find you? I know I can find you, but where can someone find you?
Exactly. So I hang out on Instagram. Worth Wellness by Erika is my handle. I also have a website, www.worthwellness.org. And my last name is spelled Wirth. And those are the mainstays where I hang out. Oh, and my podcast is the Worth Wellness Podcast. You can find that anywhere podcasts are, Apple, iTunes, Spotify. And those are the primary places. I'm pretty regular on Instagram. I have an email list, a free body and food relationship rescue guide on my website. And so if you sign up for that, you'll get on my email list. And then I send out emails several times a week with all kinds of goodies and information and resources regarding everything we've chatted about today.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Great. I think that's all my questions.
Oh, wow. You asked really good questions, James. I really enjoyed this. So fun.
Great. I'm just going to press stop. It's the fun part. Okay, just give me a second. this I'm good. Once we get talking, it just start my mind and body going to two different places. Sorry. Thank you for joining us today for another episode. Sorry.
Take all the time you need. It's all good.
If you enjoyed today's episode, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a quick review on my Facebook page, Don't Be Afraid to Talk, or DM me on Instagram. The show notes will include all of the relevant links from today's episode. If you haven't already, please download, leave a rating, and share with your friends. You might just reach that person who needs to hear this message. Please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. I am James Lumumba, signing off with gratitude.